Emilie Taman is one of the lawyers who argued for the injunction. She is with me now. Ms. Taman, thanks very much for taking time to speak with me. So you won your injunction, and I want to start by asking you for your thoughts on why it took a private citizen, a 21-year-old public servant, to launch a court case against these protests. Why wasn't this done by someone in government, someone in any level of government? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I really can't answer that, Peter. I don't know. I mean, we're hearing a lot of talk from elected officials and from the police service, but I just know that speaking to residents on the ground, they have felt really abandoned. They feel afraid to walk the streets of their own neighborhood. And, we're just hopeful that this injunction will be another tool in the police's toolkit. And, we understand we're hearing reports of an infusion of resources coming. So hopefully that will remedy whatever the issue's been until now.
So what exactly does this injunction compel the protesters to do when it comes to the honking of horns?
So this is an order enjoining all people in the downtown of Ottawa. So it's not limited to the protesters per se. So it bans honking air horns or train horns, which are the main horns that we're hearing on the large vehicles, anywhere within downtown north of the 417. It's important to understand that the injunction can only be enforced against people who have notice of it. So there'll be a lot of effort in the coming hours and days to make sure that we're disseminating this information as widely as possible. In the media, we're hoping to have it published in newspapers, and we'll be leafleting and doing everything that we can to make ssure that the injunction is known as widely as possible.
Right, because a conceivable defense for someone who breaks the injunction would be, I didn't know anything about it. But so saturation in the media. We know, roughly where the protesters are located. Are you down to the ground level of trying to distribute the message out to them where they are?
Absolutely. We were actually, we had a team of volunteers out on the weekend disseminating to them leaflets in relation to a settlement offer that our client, Sexy Lee, had made, inviting the truckers to leave Ottawa by 10 a.m. today, in which case she would release them from the lawsuit with subject to court approval. And so we were out, and a lot of them didn't realize that they could be personally on the hook in this lawsuit. So I think that was a worthwhile exercise. I should also note that the named organizers that are defendants in the class action lawsuit have also been ordered as part of this injunction to post the injunction on their social media channels. So we're hopeful that, through all of these different measures, that notice will be widely disseminated, and then that'll make the injunction that much more enforceable.
I want to come back to the wider lawsuit in just a moment, but how can this kind of injunction be enforced, and what are the consequences of ignoring it?
So this is what's interesting, because while it's true that these excessive horn honking already was a bylaw offense, a breach of this injunction would constitute a civil contempt of court, and the full range of punishment is open to a judge finding a person in breach of this injunction order. So that means anything from a fine to up to and including imprisonment. So the hammer, if I could put it that way, the threat of punishment is much more serious today, right now, than it was an hour ago.
It is a temporary injunction for the next 10 days. Then what?
So 10 days will be back in court. The reason it was limited to 10 days is because not all of the parties to the action were given notice. We don't even know the identities of a lot of the truckers. And so the judge took the position that makes it what's known as an ex parte application. So the law limits it to 10 days. But we'll have a chance to return before the judge 10 days from now. And if there's reason to seek an extension of the injunction, that's something we can seek at that time.
Okay. Look, you touched on it. The injunction's part of a wider class action suit claiming almost $10 million in damages. What's alleged in that class action lawsuit?
So we're alleging that the most immediately affected residents have suffered emotional distress. They are at risk of hearing loss, including permanent hearing loss, and other conditions associated with them being exposed to such high levels of noise. We are alleging that they've lost sleep. In some cases, they've incurred expenses because they've had to vacate their residences because it's become so intolerable to stay at home. And then in addition to those damages for mental suffering, we're also seeking punitive damages be awarded against the defendant for the particular organization. It's really important for people to understand, and this is what we'll hope to show in our lawsuit, is that the use of horns was a very specific and central tactic to this action. And so it'll be our view that, this wasn't just, unruly people honking their horns a bit, but that it was actually an orchestrated and very highly organized attempt to disrupt life for people in ways that has caused them actual harm.
All right. What was the argument from the other side about? Was the other side actively opposing demands to stop the horn honking?
They were, unfortunately. They took the position, for example, that people live downtown, they should expect to hear loud noise, that protests are a regular part of life in urban Ottawa, and we certainly don't dispute that. In fact, that's something that we should celebrate. But our view is that these particular tactics, and I should point out, Peter, that in our application and in the injunction itself, we requested a term that makes it very clear that the injunction does not apply to peaceful protest. We only targeted the horns because there's such an oppressive tactic that's being used here. So yeah, their position was that there's no irreparable harm. They deny that the horns are being honked at certain times, despite the fact that we've been able to show that they are. And in their view, because of freedom of expression, they didn't feel it was appropriate for an injunction to be issued. But again, there's nothing in this injunction that prevents anyone from expressing themselves.
All right, so it should be a lot quieter in downtown for the next 10 days, unless there's a decision made to ignore the injunction order. And so we'll see how things unfold. Emilie Taman, thanks so much for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.